Hi, everyone. Welcome to this month's Health Tech Entrepreneurs Meetup. Our speaker today is Jeanine Boyle, and the topic is what healthcare startups should know about public policy, but we're too busy to ask. So first, we're going to do our usual introduction. So I'm going to go down the list on my right. If I call your name, if you'd like to introduce yourself, please unmute, let us know who you are and what you're working on. If there's anything you're looking for, anything you can help with, this is a great time to bring it up. So I can get started. Hi, my name is Neo Gamo. I am founder and CEO of Neurosonics Medical, where we're developing a miniaturized therapeutic ultrasound device for minimally invasive neurosurgery. I'm also the vice president of business development at the MDC Studio, a startup studio in downtown Baltimore dedicated building health and medical technology startups. I'm also an associate at the Verte family of funds, which is a small venture fund investing in opportunity zone businesses across the country. So Bethany, please introduce yourself.
Sure. My name is Bethany Quinn. I am an entrepreneurship addict. Now I do consulting for entrepreneurships around strategic planning and strategy. I also, one of my main clients is a profitability consulting firm who does pipeline optimization and stuff like that. I also recently started a company called Victory's Way Craft that does work. The plan is to get into the NFT space, but right now it's AI-based art and acrylic collage.
Yes, I've seen your art recently. It's really cool.
Thanks.
I'm going to skip over Jeanine because I'll let her introduce herself later. Talal?
Yes.
Oh, please feel free to introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Talal. I'm the founder and the CEO of a company called Predictive Healthcare. We're using AI to create an application to monitor post-op surgery for a patient and when they go home. We're a startup. We've been around for almost 6 months.
Awesome, welcome. Hung Nam.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Hung Nam. I run marketing strategy and ops at a health tech company based in San Francisco. We're using computer visions as well as PT and health coaches to transitions treatment relate to MSK conditions from brick model onto a digital platform. I am here to listen and learn and looking to gain some new ideas from this conversation. So looking forward to the conversation.
Wonderful, welcome. Let's see, Margot.
Hi, I'm Margot, the CEO and founder of Biosen. We're working on developing a wearable patch that monitors biomarkers to detect mental health issues and then provides you personalized insight to help prevent them. I'm looking for a COO. We're 2 at the moment. So co-founder and CEO, if anyone knows someone.
Wonderful. Yeah, if you join our Slack channel, Slack workspace, you can also publicize there as well, or feel free to get in touch with me and I can forward it to whoever might be interested.
Great. Yeah, it's my first time on this monthly meetup, so a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Wonderful. Welcome. Chrissy?
Hello, I'm Chrissy. I'm a postdoc at Hopkins, so working on a platform for diagnostics. So we're applying for a couple cancer projects and as well as bacterial infectious disease detection. So nice to meet you.
Awesome. Lindsay?
Oh, I'll show my face here, but I don't think my hair day is looking too good. It's Lindsay Ryan from University System of Maryland. I've been the venture development director there, really involved in startups, and now do work across economic development broadly. And yeah, we have 12 universities in our system, a lot of startup activity. We do have our own investment fund as well, and I try to help startups navigate resources here in the state of Maryland. And I'm super glad to be here and learn about this aspect, which I don't hear as much about. So I'll put a couple of links in the chat as well in terms of just resources.
Wonderful, thank you. Sandy?
Hi, everybody. Sandy Williams. I'm a biomedical engineer by training, and I consult medtech, biotech, and life science companies, both on technical product development and then also on business and marketing strategy. And I actually work with Tulane on a project too.
Oh, wonderful.
So it's exciting to have him here.
Great. Vin?
Hi, everyone. My name is Vin Menon. I'm currently in the DC area. I consult to a pair of nonprofits, just do like management strategy consulting and looking to just generally learn more.
Great. And Wayne?
Good afternoon, everybody. Wayne Sternberger. I'm co-founder and CTO of Block-Synop. Formerly, I was at Johns Hopkins APL for about 42 years. Block-Synop is a relatively recent startup. I guess 2 years doesn't really qualify as a startup anymore, but we are developing a neural blockade monitor for patient monitoring perioperatively and post-operatively. And we can always use funds, and we can always use business strategy support. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you. And we had a couple of people just come in. Jillian, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Yes, I'm Jeanine Hinker with CSU Global Health and co-founder and newly minted president. And yeah, we have the Hemofuse device, which is an intraoperative autotransfusion device for mainly emergency surgeries.
Wonderful. Thank you. And Ronak?
Hi, this is Ronak Shah. I actually run a software development company, but we mainly work with a lot of big healthcare tech companies. So we mainly work with some bigger companies out of New York City as their healthcare tech partner.
Awesome. Thank you. So I think that's everyone. So I will introduce our speaker today. So our speaker today is Jeanine Boyle. She is the president of Rock Creek Policy Advisors and an attorney with a Master of Public Health and expertise in federal and state health policy, with over 20 years of experience in addressing legislative, regulatory, and public policy initiatives. She works to protect and promote business interests in alignment with the best interests of patients, consumers, and public health. Jeanine holds a BA from the Johns Hopkins University, Master of Public Health with a concentration in law and public health from the Harvard T.H. School of Public Health, and JD cum laude from Tulane University School of Law. So I will hand it off to Jeanine now.
Hey, thank you so much for the kind introduction and the opportunity to speak with everyone here today. So I have some slides. So should I share them or
oh yes, please go ahead.
Okay, let me go ahead and I will try to share my screen. And my slides are right here. Okay, folks seeing that? I'll go to full screen. Okay, are folks able to see the slides?
Yep, it looks good.
Fantastic. So great. So terrific to be here today, and I'm really excited to talk about it's a topic I've been really been talking about for quite a while, which is about public policy and where public policy really kind of intersects with the world of entrepreneurship, particularly to healthcare startups. So I thought a good place to start would be sort of very, very high level in an introductory sort of a way about everything you want to know about public policy, but we're way too busy to ask. So that's hopefully the goal of today, is to really kind of cover a very high level focus and give you a sense of maybe what you should be thinking about related to public policy and then what you do. Okay, so I'm going to advance my slide. It's not advancing. Okay. Let's see. Do I need to advance my slide? It's not going. Oh, there we go. Awesome. Okay, so for today's agenda, we're really going over what is public policy. Quick introduction about that. What is that healthcare startups need to know? Why do you need to know it? And then I thought really with the kind of the rubber hits the road is really looking at some case examples. So I picked two. We're going to look at accelerated approvals and also look at digital therapeutics, very different topics and different perspectives. And I think it'll give you some insight into the importance of paying attention to the public policy arena early on in the healthcare startup arena. And then also I was asked to provide 3 concrete examples or things that you can do right away. So I'm going to try to again. So quickly, so what is public policy? So lots of opportunities, ways to describe what public policy is. And I went right to Cliff Notes for folks that are old enough to know what Cliff Notes was. Is basically a high level perspective. So what is public policy? It really is what is action by the government. And it's often for a purpose of business focused on regulating that business and looking to prevent harm or promote goodness. So at a very high level, that really is what the intention of public policy is. And while I wrote at the federal level in this slide, it really is important to think of it at a broader perspective. And we'll get to that in a moment. So here, one way to really start is, okay, so we know what public policy is. We know you should be paying attention to it. This is really a sense of the public policy arena. And so what we're looking at for a purpose of today is really both federal and state, but also ex-US global. So while I'll focus on federal and state for today, for folks that are looking to go into the global arena, that is certainly a whole nother ball of wax. But for today, we'll look at really federal and state as our primary focus. And what we're talking about is, well, what is it that they can do in the federal and state arenas? And looking at the middle triangle area, the public policy arena, it really is several areas that you can see public policy activity. And for the most part, folks probably think of laws and statutes as sort of the main area of what we're looking when we talk about public policy. But it really starts with legislation. And it's really important to look at legislation as an opportunity to be involved in the public policy process, because it's basically laws before they're fully baked. Other areas, regulations. This is certainly an area of great interest in public policy. We're looking at the regulators out there for interest of folks on this presentation. We're looking at things just, Food and Drug Administration. We're looking at Health and Human Services. We're looking at CMS. Any way that they then take sort of their authority and then regulate in this industry, and they have quite the authority to be able to do that based on statutory authority. And finally, also throw out their policy initiatives. While this is not necessarily the power of the statute of regulation, it certainly can set the stage and have impact on both threats and opportunities. But one way to look at it is perhaps like the opioid epidemic. What are some of the great policy initiatives that can help promote access to Narcan, for example, in the state. So it's a really areas to look at when you're looking at the public policy arena. It's ways that you can influence both state statutes and laws and policy initiatives in the federal and state arena. And I want to also discuss that bottom corner of government programs. It's also important to think about the government as a payer. Because you look at the numbers of people in the two significant government programs, Medicare and Medicaid. I think the numbers are, I think it's 62, they got the numbers right, 62 million for Medicare. And with the public health emergency and sort of expansion of Medicaid, we're up to I think around over 80 million people in Medicaid. So these are significant numbers. And depending on what your product is, folks in those programs may be folks that you're looking to have access to your product. So definitely key programs to keep in mind. So we go back one. So where rubber hits the road is really what does that healthcare startups need to know? And if you take away anything from the talk today, it really is that public policy issues can have impact across the product life cycle. Not telling you anything you don't already know. Healthcare is a heavily regulated industry. You have legal issues, you have regulatory requirements across the product life cycle, and you have compliance. If you do not comply with these legal requirements, these regulatory requirements, then you're introducing quite additional legal issues into your business. So certainly compliance is a key aspect of being in the healthcare industry. I think it's also important, the next three squares here is to really think about public policy and how it impacts different sort of buckets along the product life cycle. So public policy has impact in the regulatory pathways for getting your product approved for market. There's issues related to being accessible on the market, such as coverage or reimbursement issues, particularly if your product is one that's going to be used in the Medicare population or the Medicaid population. And there's also issues of staying on the market and making sure you have good manufacturing practices, good distribution practices. So supply chain issues. These aren't just business issues. They're not just policy issues, they're business issues. And we're going to get to that just in a moment. And then what we talk about today is how sort of these top squares are really sort of you going about your daily business. But what's interesting about public policy and public policy arena, and particularly in the healthcare arena, is that this is a fluid arena. Innovation introduces change. There's outside factors that introduce change. And so it's really important to think about new developments, or what I call policy pivot points, that can introduce threats or opportunities to you in your business. And these can actually bring about public policy changes that you should be paying attention to, because ultimately public policy issues are business issues, and it's ones that you really need to be paying attention to. So this is going to be a theme throughout the talk, and I'm going to get back to it for each of our examples again. But again, why are we talking about policy issues? Is because they are business issues, and you're running a business, and they introduce uncertainty, and introduce present risks. They can also cost you money, impact how your product is covered, affect how and how much payment reimbursement your product would get, which also obviously determines if you stay in business. Introduces impact on your timelines, getting your product on the market, getting your product out the door. And it could also have the ability to derail your commercial strategies. So again, policy issues are business issues. And also, I don't mean to be all negative, they certainly can also present opportunities as well. So again, why we were bringing this up, policy issues are business issues, and investors will ask about the potential impact in your strategy to address. So this is the case whether it's a threat or an opportunity. You are expected to know about these outside forces that can have significant impact on whether your product even gets to market at all, or if it can even stay on the market. So this is something that we're seeing more and more interest, particularly with private equity, looking at staying attuned and interested and aware and monitoring what are the latest policy issues and is going to impact the businesses that they support. Okay, so let's go ahead and segue then to the first example, which is the accelerated approvals. So this is one that's going to focus for folks really in the sort of the drug space. Accelerated approvals is, I'm going to do a quick background for folks. So this is a slide with the most words on it for the entire presentation. So just bear with me through this one, but just wanted to sort of level set for folks that perhaps are in other areas of healthcare. So accelerated approvals came about in 1992 when the US Congress created as a pathway, and this came in response to the HIV epidemic. Folks will may recall that it was at one point perceived as a death sentence. There were no treatments for that at one point, and this was a pathway intended to encourage quicker access to drugs, to find new drugs to treat what was perceived as a fatal disease. So I think we sort of relate to that today with emergency authorizations for vaccines, but this is back in '92 related to the HIV epidemic. In 2012, Congress had amended the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act to base accelerated approval for drugs for serious conditions that fill an unmet medical need. So again, this is something that's a serious disease, life-threatening, that there may not be any current cures or treatments. And what they actually finalized was, okay, how we're going to do this? We're going to put clinical trials, getting a drug to market can take a very long time. And so they introduced the idea of a surrogate endpoint as a marker. It could be a laboratory measurement or a sign or some sort of measure that was thought to predict clinical benefit without having to go through the length of the clinical trial. Or intermediate clinical endpoint, so measure of the therapeutic effect that is considered reasonably likely to predict a clinical benefit as well. So accelerated approvals were not intended to be a lower standard of drug approval. However, it was meant to help get drugs to market faster by perhaps having fewer, smaller, shorter clinical trials, but it certainly was no way meant to be a drug approved at lower standards. So one I thought it was helpful to think of an example of an alternative of what might be used for accelerated approval. So a surrogate or intermediate little endpoint might be a tumor shrinkage as a predictor of clinical benefit of extending life. So a key point at the bottom here, drugs approved via this pathway are also given longer periods of time then to conduct phase 4 confirmatory trials as well. So they get on market and then they're sort of allowed to conduct confirmatory trials. But so there are some issues that have been discussed. This will come into play about companies not always meeting those deadlines. Okay, so for folks that are more visual, I took this from Digital Therapeutic, the Rare Disease organization. I thought it was a nice depiction of how it's supposed to work, and also took the stat on the bottom, which I said, so does accelerated approvals work? Do they get drugs to market faster? And this is a great example. A lot of these accelerated approved drugs or oncology drugs, and so certainly you can see access to drugs, 3 to 5 years faster, up to 12 years faster. Obviously, really have a meaningful difference for patients that don't have access to a current treatment. So now it looks, so take a pause here, accelerated approvals, policies in place, seems to be working, getting access to products faster for folks that need it. In fact, it's a crucial policy to facilitate development of drugs for serious conditions, encouraging companies to invest in those areas, the idea that their drugs be accelerated, approved at a faster rate, and also beneficial for patients looking for these cures and treatments. And particularly these facts really jump out at me, that 25 million Americans suffer from rare diseases. And of the 7,000 rare diseases that have been identified, more than 90% of them have no FDA-approved treatment. So again, this is a great pathway to help get treatments to folks that really are in need. In 2021, the FDA approved 50 new drug therapies, and 14 of the 50 use accelerated approval pathway. So again, it looks like a policy seems to be working. But I want to point on the right-hand side, this is something I took off the FDA webpage to give some examples of, on the right hand, the far right corner, the far right column, accelerated approval. It's going to give some sense of the seriousness of these conditions that are affected. The next column to the left gives you a sense of how quickly you can go from being received to being approved. So obviously this is a nice shortened timeline. But I also wanted to point out the blue arrow on the bottom, and the drug that was approved in June of 2021, which we're going to be focusing on next couple of slides, for the treatment of Alzheimer's disease, and how that then itself introduces a policy pivot point for the accelerated approvals pathway. Okay, there we go. I'm back one. There we go. So again, so what happened? So June 7th of 2021, the FDA approved Adulthelm. This is for Alzheimer's. Again, great medical need. However, it was approved with some controversy. Notably, 10 of the 11 members of an advisory committee of experts convened and did not believe there was enough evidence to justify approval. At the same time, there's also questions raised about perhaps was there pressure for the manufacturer on the FDA. And also the drug was launched at a significant price of $56,000. The article that I pulled from the New York Times was one of many articles discussing the coverage of the approval of Adulthelm, the controversy that accompanied it, and certainly got significant amount of attention. Okay, so who do you get attention by? By public policymakers. So this, again, this is what I call a policy pivotal moment. You have a policy that was working, going on, and then something happens, and then it draws attention, and policymakers are then engaged. So this is a good example of what can happen pretty quickly. Because remember, the drug was approved on June 7th, and these are, right away, June 2021, we already have the House Committee on Oversight and Reform investigating this particular drug. And then it kind of goes from there into not just that particular instance, but let's now look at the entire accelerated approval pathway. And then so you can see how it sort of picks up steam to the point that by March of 2022, we now have 22 bills examining the accelerated approval pathway. That again, so while you had sort of it moving along, you had some critics looking at, well, not all companies were doing their phase 4 confirmatory trials, sort of coming to a head with the approval of Adulthelm and the sort of pickup of the policymakers about this is an issue that we need to examine and do something about. So it's the do something about that catches people's attention, and that is really sort of the balance between is this an opportunity or is this a threat? And it sort of depends on where you sit. But for the advocacy community, they became incredibly concerned about what they perceived as a threat to the accelerated approval pathway. And it wouldn't be just the advocacy community, but certainly the manufacturers and folks who are innovators who are looking at using this pathway as an opportunity to get products to market, became very concerned about sort of what they perceived as a threat to the accelerated approval pathway. And I gave this as an example of a letter that came out. So look at the dates. The last was we're looking at things moving very, very quickly. And this is a letter that went to the Secretary of the Department of Health and Human Services, signed by 91 organizations, basically saying that there is great value to the accelerated approval pathway and great concern that particular steps that could be taken could really derail this as a way to get needed products to market. And so again, so it's an opportunity for the voices to step in and voice their concerns about what they perceive as potential threats to a pathway for needed medicines. And so as recently as May 4th, what we have is not a finished situation, but a situation in progress. So as of May 4th, House lawmakers unveiled a package that included potential changes to the accelerated accelerated approval pathway. Since then, I think yesterday, the Senate is considering their own possible package of changes to accelerated approval pathway. So this is not a written chapter, but I wanted to give it as an example as something that's really in motion and real. And the need for folks like the patient organizations, like the innovators who are trying to bring products to market, to know these things are going on and to voice and express their concerns so that when discussions like this are going on, and they're going on right now, that their voice can be heard and considered, so that we do not see something become an idea and then one that is not in the best interests of patient care. So to recap, what we saw with this is we saw a status quo. We saw accelerated approval sort of as a policy. We saw the new development. So even though there had been concerns in the past about the pathway, particularly related to companies not necessarily conducting those phase 4 trials in a timely manner, it was really the introduction of Adulthelm that sort of put this into the spotlight and really introduced the opportunity for potential public policy change. Great. So here's the takeaway slide from that. So if you are a biotech startup with a focus on rare diseases, the accelerated approval policy is a business issue for you. There's impact, whether your product qualifies for accelerated approval. It can impact you on terms of money, how much money that you are going to, that you had projected to get your product to market. It certainly affects timelines, and it's certainly something that must be accounted for in your commercial strategy. Also believe it also though, but the flip side, could also present opportunity. Again, there's been some criticisms out there about companies not doing their phase 4 confirmatory trials. This is an opportunity to put stronger regulatory frameworks in there that basically minimize any questions about product safety or effectiveness of the products, which again is another sort of critique we've seen about accelerated approval products before. Are they not, they're not going through the same rigorous process that other products are? So is an opportunity to address those sort of concerns at this time. And certainly, as mentioned earlier, this is something that investors are aware of and would certainly ask as well. Okay, so I'm going to pivot to our second case example. We're going to do this one a little differently. So digital therapeutics is another area that is certainly a hot topic. And just to quickly sort of level set for the group. So digital therapeutics deliver therapeutic interventions directly tied to patients using evidence-based, clinically evaluated software, treating, managing, preventing a broad spectrum of diseases and disorders. There's a series of, looking to be cleared and approved. Some are, some don't go that route, but some do, and it's available over the counter or is prescribed by physicians. And digital therapeutics are regulated as medical devices. They're going to go that route. And we've seen a lot of attention given recently to the category of software as a medical device. So this is sort of in its infancy in a lot of ways, watching this as really a new category and watching it really sort of grow and evolve. So, but I see there's a lot of sort of promise in this area with forecasts of about $500 billion for the digital health sector by 2026. So certainly a growth sector. I wanted to pull out just some examples, pull this for the Digital Therapeutics Alliance. So what are we talking about when we're talking about digital therapeutics? So just some anything from AI to medical wearables as well. Again, this is an interesting space watching this sort of evolve with the FDA looking to encourage growth in this space, particularly I think during this whole public health emergency, we've seen a lot of interest in digital therapeutics and encouraging growth in this area. So there's a lot of issues related to digital therapeutics. Again, with FDA approvals, should you go that particular route? Where do you fall within approvals? Artificial intelligence is another area that is certainly getting a lot of attention. But I think for our person today, and because I only have so much time, I just wanted to focus really on a very unique area here, which is the idea of coverage and coverage of payment for this pathway. So while I think there's been a great amount of headway made related to the relationship with FDA and approvals, I think one area that remains sort of a barrier is really the lack of current coverage and coverage of payment pathway for these devices. CMS has not really issued clear guidance for the reimbursement of digital therapeutics, and perhaps maybe while Medicare may not be your target audience, CMS coverage decisions, which is Medicare, really set the standard for commercial coverage. So where does it really put digital therapeutics, where you may be able to get through the FDA process, but then are you sort of halted by the lack of a clear pathway on the reimbursement side? And I pulled this quote, which I thought was telling, which is that while a number of digital therapeutics have gone through the regulatory processes and are prescribed like a drug, so did all the right things on that side, they are still not reimbursed. And so what is, what can we do about that barrier? And so this is a sort of a rather than policy taking something that's existing and something changes, this is something that's sort of new. But it's really a policy opportunity. And I think patient groups, innovators have all realized that, okay, so we're sort of struggling with getting our coverage and reimbursement because of the lack of a clear pathway. And so as recently as March 10th, there was a bipartisan Access to Prescription Digital Therapeutics Act introduced in both the U.S. House and Senate. This would help basically create a statutory pathway for prescription digital therapeutics. And this is something that is worthy of your attention because, again, if you can't get your product covered and reimbursed, even if you can get it in the commercial space, that government market or having CMS sort of set the stage for standard of coverage is really critical for patient access as a whole. So I raise that because, again, this is an example of innovation, something that does not fit in the current framework. And it also presents a public policy opportunity and threat. I put down threat because it's being shaped right now, and you may know your needs because of your specific product, but perhaps what's being written in the Access to Prescription Digital Therapeutics Act doesn't cover your product. So again, worth it to pay attention to what's going on and how this would then impact you as well. So for me, potential opportunities and threats. So takeaway here, if you're a startup with a digital therapeutic, public policy issues, and basically this is a reimbursement issue, is a public policy issue. Policy is a reimbursement issue. It impacts whether your product is covered. It influences coverage decisions in the commercial market. There's absolutely a clear relationship between Medicare coverage and commercial coverage. It'll cost you money if you don't have a coverage reimbursement strategy in place. It'll affect your timelines. If you can get yourself a good reimbursement strategy in place, know exactly what you need to do, you can lengthen or shorten your timeline to getting on the right formularies. And so this really is an issue that must be accounted for in commercial strategy. And it also, I think, presents the opportunity that, it's transparent. It's no longer guessing. What do I have to do? Sometimes you know what to do to be approved by FDA, but then it's sort of a mystery about what to do to be covered and reimbursed. And so a straightforward pathway takes away that mystery, and it's much more transparent, and therefore something that you can plan for. Again, investors certainly are very interested in making sure you have coverage of your product. So certainly a business issue. Great. And so in the short interest of time, I'm going to go through the last slides relatively quickly. So you probably already picked up some of these points already, but it's really helpful to know what your policy touch points are. So we already mentioned, I think CMS came up, HHS came up, Congress and executive branches, certainly opportunities for policy touch point. Don't forget the states as well, particularly related to Medicaid. So if you are a product that is really sort of your target consumer is a Medicaid patient, the states have a lot of ability to determine access in the Medicaid arena. So certainly want to keep that on your radar as well. And finally, another thing I wanted to mention here is the role of associations. So sometimes you're not necessarily in it alone. Associations, such as I listed some here, Digital Therapeutics Alliance, AdvaMed, Pharma, you may share some business interests with these folks. So you may not need to go it alone in following and advocating for roles when it comes to things such as a pathway for digital therapeutic reimbursement. So you may have folks that you can work with in certain areas. So just wanted to flag that, but also keep in mind that association interests may not be your specific business interest. So it's also helpful to recognize that where you may have a large interest in common, your product may also have a small, more niche interest as well. So just wanted to flag that. And just to circle back to what we talked about. So this is a very high level. This is not all inclusive, but it's certainly reason why we raise these, why I think it's policy issues are something you really should be following as business issues. It's not something that has to be done to you. It's you certainly can have a voice. And as a healthcare startup, someone that's looking to bring something to market to help people, it's an important voice. And so understand what the issues are and what your message is. What is it that, why is it that you want this to continue? Why is it that you think this is a bad idea? So in the interest of, so for example, accelerated approvals, your message could be, don't discourage new treatments when there is currently an unmet need. Looking at some of your policy touch points, who do you want to deliver this message to? FDA, CMS, Congress. And then I mentioned before, you're not in this necessarily by yourself. Who are some of your message partners? Patient community, associations, healthcare providers. Similarly, on the digital therapeutic side, what's the issue? What's your message? We need a pathway for reimbursement to encourage adoption of our digital therapeutics for better patient access. Again, who do we tell this message to? FDA, Congress, the states. Who do we partner with? Patient community, associations, healthcare providers. So this all gets me to, and hopefully I left a little bit of time for questions. There are three concrete takeaways, which is policy issues really are something that you really need to get a handle on, because if you don't get a handle on it, it may come back at a time when you really don't want it to come back. And so it's always better to be prepared. And how to be prepared is to, in the first place, I recommend undertaking a startup policy assessment. So this is basically taking a look at, where is your product approved? Is it a device? Is it a drug? Who's your consumer audience? What's going on out there? Is accelerated approval something I need to follow? Is do I need to look at the digital therapeutics pathway? It really helps to have a sense of where you are today and where you anticipate your product going to the consumer. So really undertake a very, this doesn't have to be completely in the weeds. I think at this point, I think a high level startup policy assessment would be very beneficial. Secondly, I'd recommend establishing internal buy-in. It's really good for folks in your marketing team to understand different aspects of the company, understand that policy issues are out there. It's something that we should pay attention to because it may need to be an all hands on deck at certain points. So getting that early on really saves you valuable time when you need it should an issue arise. And then finally, monitor for policy developments. As I said, this healthcare policy arena is fluid. These pivotal policy moments can come in, such as the Adulthelm approval. So it's always helpful to be monitoring, and you can do this by working with your associations. You can do this by subscribing to certain, the ping sheets, certain inside health policy. Certain subscriptions can help flag issues for you as well. So I will leave it there because I think I'm coming to an end here. So my contact information, if you would like additional information, I know I had to go through everything very, very quickly, but I hope I give you a sense of the importance of policy issues to your business And just knowing to be on the lookout for them early on can really save you, and particularly and potentially your product and even your company in the long run. Great. So that's it. And I will see if there are any questions.
Thank you, Jeanine. That was really, really helpful. Are there any questions from the audience? Feel free to jump in. Go. Yes, Wayne.
So when I registered for this, your registration requires you to put a question in, which is great. My question was FDA, friend or foe, but let me sort of twist that a little based on what I thought I was hearing here. So you're talking about public policy, and I think that there's a very interesting intersection with public perception. You care to comment on that?
Absolutely. I think public perception can sometimes drive public policy if you're not careful. So it's absolutely, I think the Adulthelm example is a great one of that, there was it happened very, very quickly. The Adulthelm approval comes out, there's a controversy attached to it. Now before that, accelerated approvals were sort of going along. You would see criticisms, you'd see people say, hey, these phase 4 trials aren't being done in a timely manner, or gee, are these drugs really approved? Are they really the same rigorous approval process as other drugs? And so these criticisms are along the lines of popping up here and there, but everything sort of came to a head with Adulthelm, and it seemed to be kind of roped into this larger controversy. So issues about the phase 4 confirmatory trials not really being done all the time, questions about, are those drugs really approved as a lesser standard? Everything sort of came up at once, and it was really driven by sort of that perception that, well, was Adulthelm really approved? Should that not have been approved? What was it influenced by the innovator? It was a manufacturer. So you're right. So I think in some ways perception did contribute to elevating that issue to one that then policymakers stepped in and felt they had to act.
Thank you.
Sure.
Hi, Jeanine. Thanks. I had a question about like reimbursement policy and risk, and if there's any way that somebody in the early stages can start talking and figure out ways to address that question before getting to that point where they need reimbursement.
Absolutely. And I think just one big takeaway is the sooner the better. That one of the situations that more than one company I know has come into is they get their FDA approval and then they pivot. Now we're going to take a look at coverage and reimbursement. And even if they're say, well, we didn't, we're going to look at commercial and we really didn't pay attention to government pathways. Well, commercial really does look back to Medicare coverage. And so the sooner you can have coverage and reimbursement as something that you handle simultaneously with if you're seeking FDA approval, that's when you start thinking about it. It really can put you behind the 8 ball to have to be thinking about it after you're approved and clock is sort of ticking because you're not putting yourself in the best position to be picked up the way that you would be if you had a clear strategy, a clear reimbursement pathway. So it's definitely something that should be sort of, I think, moved much further into closer to the FD discussions than not.
And I guess I'm kind of wondering, like for FDA, you engage early, you can do pre-submission talks. And like, is there some sort of analog with that for reimbursement where you can start to set up a formal engagement early?
Absolutely. I think there's been a real need for that. And so I know Digital Therapeutics Alliance has been very active in that space. This is pushing for something along the lines such as the legislation that's now under consideration. And I think there's also, CMS also understand there is a disconnect as well. So I think there's a lot more interest in working together with the FDA to try to find ways to sort of recognize that there can be a gap in coverage, but we're not there yet. So I think we have a bit to go, but I think things such as legislation will be very, very helpful. Certainly, again, working with your associations such as the Digital Therapeutics Alliance, be very, very helpful.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you so much, Jeanine. That was really informative and an issue that I know I haven't thought carefully about yet. So yeah, this was very helpful. Thank you so much.
Great, you're welcome. It was terrific to speak with everyone. I'm very excited to be able to do so. So thank you again for the opportunity.
Great, thank you. Have a good day, everyone.
Bye-bye.